Hi, all you cave dwellers, and welcome to the Cavern Podcast. The Cavern Club, the most famous club in the world. From the Beatles and the Stones to the Arctic Monkeys and Adele. Join us on our podcast for Cavern Conversations. Each episode, we talk to a special guest with real Cavern connections. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Keats, and you are listening to Series 1, Episode 7. We're chatting on this episode with a legendary guitarist. His career started in the early 70s in New York, and in 1974, he got the nod to replace guitarist Mick Taylor in David Bowie's band. This was a working relationship that would continue on and off for 40 years. In between this, he played with so many artists, including, famously, being an integral member of the band on John Lennon and Yoko Ono's 1980 album Double Fantasy, as well as the follow-up Milk and Honey, which was released 3 years after John's death. He's a Cavern Club Wall of Famer, an International Beatle Week favourite, and he's someone who's famously quoted as saying he doesn't have a plan B, doesn't believe in plan Bs. In fact, to quote him, if you have a backup plan, then eventually you become the backup plan. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast, Earl Slick. Earl, what's the plan?
Well, we got plan A, which is just constantly in use because it's what it is. I got one plan, A.
Okay, so you stick with plan A, and it's you seem to be doing all right on it. So,
plan A is to get the idea, dig in, and just see what happens.
Yeah. Just be creative and let it flow.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, part of the plan B thing I got to thank my father for, because he kept screaming plan B at me, and the more he said it, the more plan B went into the dust.
Well, that's a typical thing. If your father is saying you've got to have a plan B, and presumably, you can't just rely on music for a living, well, that plan B is not going to happen.
No, what's funny, though? If I look back at it, and times were a bit different then, but most of my mates that we all started off, I'm about 8 or 9 years younger than, the Beatles, the Stones, and all those guys. So I was a kid when they hit. And that's what got my attention. That's what made me want to pick up my guitar. And as I went along and started learning how to do it, and I got a little better at it, and we all started to put together bands and stuff, not making much money at all, is that the guys that did have the plan B, the backup, the school, or maybe joining up for some job, they never got out of the neighborhood.
No. Well, you don't. I think you've got to commit. You've got to have the balls to commit, really, haven't you?
You do. I think it's a combination of balls, and I think at that age, I think I was about 12 or 13 when I started. So by the time I became aware that I was actually going to do this for a living, and I loved it so much, the idea of taking my time away from that was not acceptable. And I didn't want to take any time at all away from what I was doing. And I didn't have aspirations to think I was going to get successful enough at it ever. My thought process was, I just love this and I'm going to do it. And I'll make whatever money I can make. And the backup plan to me was just, maybe it was, what it was too? It was teenage stubbornness.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I'm gonna live forever, and there are absolutely no consequences to any of my actions.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. Well, the idea of this podcast series is to speak to people who've got, strong Cavern connections, played the venue. In your case, you played the venue probably 3 or 4 times, I think, and we inducted you into our Hall of Fame, our Wall of Fame, which we'll talk about later on. But it's stories really and connections, and we're going to go right back. So the inspiration, it's interesting straight away you're getting your inspiration for getting involved in music. You mentioned the Beatles and the Stones, so we're going the right way in terms of the Cavern straight away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to talk about your time with David and with John and Yoko and all the other things you've done. But I think we should start really. Last year in 2022, we managed to do something which, without your help, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, you were fundamental. And we started the conversation probably in about 2019, where we were coming up to the 40th anniversary of John and Yoko's Double Fantasy. Here's Tank. Here's the dog. Tank's come in there, star of the show. He's huge. He's huge.
He's not even full grown yet. Go away.
You've got no chance against him. You're not exactly a big fella, are you?
Well, I'm also not worried about burglars either.
Okay, so Tank's in there. Yeah, so we as International Beatle Week, anyone who doesn't know, we do this huge Beatle festival in Liverpool. We bring fans and guests from all over the world, bands from all over the world. And we had this idea to get John Lennon's original band, or as many as we could, back for what was the 40th anniversary. Obviously, things got in the way in terms of lockdown and all that. We managed to do it in 2022, and you were fundamental there. And I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think we should go, before we can talk about getting the band back 40 years later. I know it's a question I know that you've been asked many times, but how did you end up playing with John and Yoko on those sessions in 1980? What was the route to that?
Okay, so my manager gets a phone call from Jack Douglas, spring of 80. He's got a project, an album project for me to do, but he can't even tell her what it is. So I'm curious at this point, and I kind of let it go for a little while, and then I started, because there was a few more phone calls between the two of them about dates and stuff, and I started to get really curious. So I went into detective mode, and I go, okay, who's connected with Jack that's so big that he's got to be quiet about it, and I can't talk about it. So I went through the Aerosmiths and the Cheap Tricks and the rest of the stuff, and I go, wait a minute, who's that big that it has to be that quiet? And I thought, Lennon hasn't made a record, and he's been invisible for 5 years. And I just took a wild guess.
Okay.
And I had my manager, when she spoke to Jack, I said, when you get Jack on the phone next time, just say John Lennon and see how he reacts. And she did, and he did.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was so before you went into the room, you knew what you were dealing with as well.
Oh yeah, but by the time we got past all the secrecy stuff, they obviously had to get plane tickets and hotels and all that kind of stuff. And so, once that happened, the cat was out of the bag, but I was still sworn to secrecy.
Going back to what got you into the music, the Beatles, the Stones. So suddenly you're going to be working with John Lennon. What's the reaction to? I mean, how old were you then? Probably early 20s.
No,
late 20s maybe, or you
late 20s. Yeah.
You've been with Bowie earlier on, so you've been used to working with that level of artist. But this is John Lennon. I mean, how do you feel?
That still went out the window. All of that experience and being comfortable really did go out the window. And at first, it was like, excitement was the first thing. But the first day of recording, the night before, I started definitely getting anxiety, because it's the more that you connect with an artist that means something to you, especially from the time you were a kid, the more impact that has. And John, of the four Beatles, was always my favorite. John was the irreverent one. He was the fighter. He was the big mouth. He was the jokester. He was everything like all the guys in my neighborhood were like, so I related to that. And also, the John Lennon, even when he went into the solo stuff, it was a lot more hard edge and cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas, I really, George was doing his sort of ethereal thing, and Ringo was doing his covers and his pop, and then Paul
his commercial stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, Paul was the pop master and still is of all time. John, though, it was a different ballgame. I was listening to stuff like Cold Turkey and Mother and Isolation.
Plastic Ono Band is, that is the album, isn't it?
Yeah, all that cutting edge, depressing, angry shit really resonated with me. And then plus, John could write a funny song. He could write a love song, But I gravitated towards him. So the night before the sessions, I did get nervous, which uncharacteristically nervous. The first time I met Bowie, I wasn't that nervous.
Right.
I got up.
But when you would have met Bowie for the first time, I mean, he was big. Of course, he was huge, but he wasn't the Beatles, was he? At that, he wasn't as big as a Beatle. So this is a different level.
It was a whole different thing too, because Bowie came up as, I would say, the first one to break through the whole British glam thing, And it wasn't. I didn't really follow him. I was well aware how huge he was. There was no doubt about that, because he was breaking really big in 1974 when I met him. But it was not the same as John. No.
Okay, so you're in there. I mean, it's safe to say he got a great band behind him as well, didn't he? I mean, the guys who were in that band. And
yeah.
So was that again through Jack? I mean, Jack came to Beatle Week. What a great guy, But presumably, was it Jack that was putting these musicians forward to John? Because originally, Cheap Trick tried out for that gig, didn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't so much say that they tried out. I think that Jack thought it would be a good fit, because obviously, Cheap Trick is so Beatle motivated, and they did something a lot of the other Beatle motivated bands couldn't do. They still sounded like Cheap Trick. You could hear the Beatle influence, but it didn't sound like the Beatles.
Yeah.
So I think that was the logic behind that. But from what I understand, I think they did go in the studio and they cut tracks, and they sound great.
Yeah, I've heard them, yeah.
But it sounded like Cheap Trick, which is wonderful. But
obviously not what John and Yoko wanted. So
no.
So it's fair to say, ironically, Jack actually did have a plan B. No.
I think the plan B was put upon him by John.
Oh, okay. So John wanted a plan B. What a lucky plan B. What a lucky plan B.
Which is funny, because John was never a plan B guy in the first place.
Yeah.
He wasn't. But so the first time the night before, I got real nervous, and I walk in the studio. I went really early to the Hit Factory, because I'm thinking musicians are inherently late or last minute. So I'm going to go real early. There's going to be nobody there. I could have a cup of coffee, relax, have a smoke, twiddle on my guitar for a minute to just kind of level out. And I walked in, nobody's in the control room. Great. I look through the glass into the studio, and there's a chair in the middle of the room, and he's sitting in it. And my first thought was, I don't know if it was excitement or dread. So I'm going, holy shit, I'm in here by myself.
And the boss
what do I do? The boss is here. So I went in and introduced myself, and his response was odd, because he said, it's really great to see you again.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had to take pause on that. And as it turns out, he remembered the sessions he did with us, with the Bowie band.
Okay. Yeah.
Across the universe and fame. And at first I was somewhere embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. But I was honest. I said,
I suppose you wouldn't presume that he would necessarily remember you, maybe.
Well, the part that I didn't really assume was that I wouldn't remember him, and I didn't.
Well, that's slightly outrageous, if you don't mind me saying.
Oh, it's absolutely fucking outrageous. Yeah. It's
You're
like I just met I met my favorite Beatle. I was actually in the studio with him recording songs with my then boss David Bowie, and don't remember it.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this guy's gonna hate me, and he just laughed. He thought it was hysterical.
Oh, that's bad.
But that's typical. That's typical Lennon.
I mean, that sets the tone. I mean, I remember when we did the show, which again we'll talk about in a minute, that we did in 2022 in Liverpool, and we played quite a few of the outtakes and John talking and the giving and yelling instructions in the studio, And as big Lennon fans, we've all heard those demos. I had them originally on cassettes, but there was a sense of fun in the room, and he was pleased to be back in the studio. It's fair to say, would you?
Oh, he was thrilled. And, you know what he liked too is it wasn't a band. It was John Lennon, and we were the backup guys.
Yeah.
But the way he approached it, and it was real obvious, he created a band atmosphere as opposed to a session guy working atmosphere, which I think is what made him comfortable. He liked the idea of being in a band. He really did. And so that made the sessions not only a whole lot more enjoyable, but I think it made the sessions a lot more creative.
I was just going to say about in terms of being creative, were you allowed? I mean, I know the answer is yes. Was it? Did he didn't turn up with all the parts all ready to go and say this is what you're playing, or was it a mixture? What was the creative process?
Okay, it was the majority of the guys that were there were the top session guys: Tony Levin, Andy Newmar, Huey McCracken. The musical director, Tony DeVillio, he had written out charts for these guys.
Okay.
Because that's how they work. I didn't have charts. And I found out later on that the reason I was there was that John wanted one guy that wasn't a session guy, just to get that little extra street edge.
Yeah, absolutely. So
for me, it was great because I couldn't read charts. I didn't understand any of that stuff. But that's what they wanted. So, and even when the guys were reading the charts, there was a lot of leeway. In other words, okay, here's the chart. But if somebody deviated from that, it would get John's attention. He goes, "Oh, I love that." So it wasn't like he had to have note for note. Yeah. If he did, those records would have never sounded like that.
No. I mean, it's great. Two great albums came out of those sessions. We know that.
Yeah.
And again, the band that you were playing with. So, I mean, that was back in 1980, recording that. Just in terms of bringing it to the Cavern and International Beatle Week, what was it like? So we got the band together, as many as we could, which took us a while. I think you introduced me to Andy, and then Andy said, well, what about Tony Levin? Which I thought, well, if we can get Tony, that'd be great. What was it like? I mean, I was there when you all arrived. We were sitting outside the hotel when I think Andy had just got off the train from London. And I know paths had crossed over the years, but I think that was the first time you, Tony Levin and Andy Newmark had been in the same room, the three of you, since the sessions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The funny thing was after all those years, I'd never run into Tony.
No.
I met Tony and to Andy. Me and Tony lived relatively close in the area, and plus, I just over the years I've always run into Tony, but not Andy. So it was kind of great to have the three of us there. We did miss having Huey there, though.
Absolutely,
we really did.
Absolutely.
But it was just having the three of us there together. It was great, and it just doesn't always happen. But when we were sitting outside having a coffee or whatever, we were interacting like we had 40 years ago. It was like nothing changed.
Like being with old schoolmates, so you just pick it up.
Yeah, and it was great. So that was the first time we were together. It was a great feeling. It really was.
But it was a great show as well. I mean, I think we joked at the time it had taken 3 years for it to actually. We missed the anniversary by 2 years.
But we had three years to put that part together and 1 day to put the band together.
Yeah, but you're talking with half decent musicians, you'd be okay.
Yeah, and I'm like the Liverpool guys that you brought in were stellar.
Yeah, Tony Coburn and Barney.
Oh yeah, they
Barney
were all
Taylor.
great. I mean, I didn't have to think about anything that they were doing. And funny enough, normally in a situation like that, which I've been in before, where an event of this sort would happen and they would bring guys in, I'd be really nervous.
Yeah.
But I trusted.
I was going to say, you know us, you trust us, because, we go back a few years now. I mean, I was looking over and stuff. First time we met was in 2015 when you came to the festival when our good friend and lunatic Mr. Mark Hudson put the band together. Have you seen Mark recently at all? Have you caught up with him?
Yeah.
How is he? Is he still insane?
Of course he is.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
actually, I speak to him usually every week or so. He calls up and insults me, and we have a good conversation.
You bastard. Oh, you bastard.
I know.
So Mark came up with this idea. He said, "I want to put," and it included. It was I think we named the band the lads who knew the boys. Was that right? Something like the boys. The boys who knew the lads.
The boys who knew the lads.
Yeah, but so it was a super group of everyone who'd played with all four Beatles at some point. So Denny Sylwell was on drums. Mark, obviously, with all the Ringo connections. Yourself with more than John, because we'll talk about this in a minute, because you played with George and Ringo as well. And Gary from Elephant's Memory Band was on bass. Joey Molland, Joey, we were talking before we started recording that. I mean, we are going to get Joey onto the Cavern podcast because, obviously signed to Apple with Badfinger, played with George. But the problem is, we're going to have to get subtitles because you can't understand the thing he says. But so Joey was on the gig. So it was, and that was a great show. And again, we teamed you up with a couple of our guys. What was that the first Beatle event you'd done? Or had you done any others? Was that the first one?
No, I had done a few. I did two of them here in the States earlier, around 2000 and maybe 8 or 9, something like that. And I wasn't terribly thrilled with the way it was done. And I haven't done one since. It wasn't what we did in Liverpool at all.
I was going to, so we didn't put you off.
No. You know what it was? Is that the events that were done here were much more commercially motivated, merch, Beatles stuff,
I think I know the festival you're talking about. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it just, what it was on those? I felt, those Comic-Con things that they do?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt like one of those washed up celebrities sitting at a table being gawked at by 80-year-old fans. That's what I felt like.
Yeah, I get that.
It was embarrassing, actually. But when we did the Liverpool one, it felt like, well, these are the real guys. We're playing together.
Yeah.
And
we put you in a really, proper old-fashioned shitty rehearsal room as well.
I loved that little. That was
great.
Right around. It was right around the road, right from the offices and all that.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Proper little rehearsal studio.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect. So it felt like, okay, here we are. We're playing music, and that's what we're doing. As opposed, we didn't feel put on a spectacle kind of a thing.
But to be fair with you, and I completely get what you're saying about like the washed up, the film guy he was in I don't know, Star Wars once or whatever. I get that, but whenever you've been back, and certainly in 2022, what you are great with, and Mark Hudson as well, as because you two were like a duo in 2022. The two of you walking around Liverpool, a couple of lunatics together. But you're great with the fans as well, aren't you? You are very gracious with them, and you'll spend time, and you will give the photos and give a chat. So if the right level, you must enjoy it, or do you endure that? What?
No, I enjoy it a lot. And when it's an organic thing, organic to me means, okay, I'm in Liverpool to do a Beatle Cavern Club event, and it's all about the music, and their fans are there all about the music, and I love doing that. And actually, I feel like it's not so much of a responsibility, but it's like, these guys, in all honesty, everybody that you meet that has latched on to me, whether it be Beatles or other things I've done, by them following me and supporting me my whole life, it actually it gives me a way to make a living, so I could do what it is. that I could give back to them again. So that all works. The thing about the Comic-Con that I mentioned is that you'll go into this huge venue and there'll be just tables and people sitting there with 8x10s, and God bless everybody that does it. And I can't put that down. I'm just not very comfortable with that, because that's what those are about. They're not about doing the music and then seeing the fans. It's all about just the fan part without the music.
Yeah. And it's so expensive, aren't they? I mean, we have Comic-Con twice a year now in Liverpool at the arena, which is, that's a huge venue. And it's big business. But no, I think what you're saying about our festival, at the heart of it, it's like what we do at the Cavern. At the heart of it has got to be the music. It's got to be the integrity of the music. And once you've lost that, well, you shouldn't be doing it. So it's not all about, being commercial. So we've got another friend of yours who you've worked with many, many times who's going to be in this series, Glenn Matlock. I mean,
oh yeah.
So and your careers have sort of weaved in and out over the years. But how did you meet? Was it just like was it over here? How did that come about?
Funny thing with Glenn is that I was doing a project with a British clothing designer named Keenan Duffy that lives in New York now. Keenan does clothes for everybody, including Bowie. And we got in touch. Oh God, we met on what was the thing before Facebook?
MySpace.
MySpace.
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah, that didn't last too long. But we got to chatting on that. We became friends, and we wrote some music and started doing things. And we decided that let's cut some of these. Maybe do a few gigs. And he suggested Glenn. And I'd never met Glenn before, so. That's how I met Glenn, through Keenan. So we put together this myself, Keenan, Matlock, and Clem Burke.
Okay.
And we cut some tracks, and we did maybe a half a dozen gigs around the New York area, and then everybody kind of just got busy and went on their own.
That's a great band, isn't it? I mean that's a great lineup. I want to go back to because we've touched on it, and we can't not talk about, how. So you started with David, 74, did you say? Yeah. And you were with him for a few years now. I know there was a disagreement with management, which we've spoken about it before.
Yeah.
But so that period, I mean, that must have been like being thrown into a completely different world in the first place. I know you were saying earlier on that you were aware of how huge he was, but you weren't following him. But that must have been a baptism of fire.
It was weird because my background at that point, like I was 21 or 22 or something at the time. So all the bands I'd been playing with in New York were blues-based rock and roll bands. They were more in the Stonesy area and also in the Muddy Waters and that kind of thing. And when I got called for the Bowie gig, I was like, I didn't see the musical sense in calling me, knowing what Mick Ronson did, even though in hindsight, mine and Mick's guitar playing in certain parts of our guitar playing was similar. Me being a lot more on the blues end than Mick was. But I said, okay, look, because I had a band that was getting ready to get signed. And they offered me the audition for Bowie. And I thought, we've come close to getting a deal a few times, and every time it falls through. So do I want to take a chance to stay with the band, or do I want to do this one? So I did the audition, and I met with David. And once I did that, I decided that David was the right move.
I mean, was that because of conversations about music and about the roots of where he'd started?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Very much so. I mean, what he expected me to do, the kind of music he was doing, the kind of music that he listened to, and it made sense.
But was it similar when you were saying before about you worked with John, and you were brought in to add that that extra element, that maverick element, whatever, like creativity? Was that a similar thing with David? Did you have that same sort of freedom creatively?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. With John, because I wasn't reading the charts, right? And thank God for Huey, because, I wasn't, I played on other people's albums. That wasn't new to me. But not at this kind of level and all that. And then, John had sat me and Huey next to each other. So I would just take cues during the first week of recording, because he'd met John and he worked with John before. And he really helped me just to kind of wrap my head around what it was. And John was so gracious about the parts. He would give me an idea, not play this note, this note, this note, this note. He would say, do this thing.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing was.
Which as a creative being, I mean, that's, there'd be nothing worse than being told exactly what to play. What's the point? So that was the same thing with David. You had that freedom in because you recorded the 2 albums. Is that right? With David before
by that time, 3.
Okay, 3 albums.
There was 3. Yeah. There was the live.
Yeah,
at the Tower Theater. Then there was Young Americans, and then there was Station to Station. And I always look at how lucky I got, because the business shit didn't hit the fan till after Station was recorded, and I feel fortunate that was one of his iconic records that still that's still in the top 5 of as far as the fans go. So
right,
I feel good that at least it wasn't.
Yeah, it didn't mess it up. It didn't mess up that part of the story. Yeah,
no, it didn't. It didn't.
But when you did stop working with or for David, I mean, it was quite a few years later before you. It was the early 2000s, I think, when you got back with him. Was that right? Was it?
No. I split in 1976 and came back at 83.
Oh, okay.
For that Serious Moonlight.
Yes, you did.
Right. And then in David's, inevitable way that he did things, we finished up a year on the road with that thing. And then the last gig we did, he said, "Oh, we're going to get together in January, like a month later, and do another record." I never heard anything. So I speak to Carmine Rojas, the bass player. I said, "What's going on?" I go, "Yeah, we're in the record, and he's got this guitar player in here." And that was that. It's the way David did things. And I learned early on not to take it to heart or seriously or personally, which made for a really good relationship with David that whole time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So presumably that's because he knows what direction he wants to go. He wants to mix it up a bit, which is what he was about as an artist, obviously.
Well, obviously, too, because if you even look at John or a lot of other solo artists as their careers are going on, and you look at album credits, it's not the same guys all the time.
You've got to mix it up, haven't you?
Yeah. And you know what? As it being their career and their thing, they have total right to do what they want to do. And you can't be a crybaby about it. You just got to go, okay.
Yeah. Where's the next gig?
That was great. Yeah. Where's the next gig? Exactly. Where's the next gig?
You've got something. Which brings us nicely. I mean, so that's 83, the Serious Moonlight. So 85. Now, I was really surprised when I saw this footage a few years ago. I think I'd seen the Carl Perkins special years ago, but having got to know you a little bit, and then you see it again and go, "Oh, there's Earl. What's it? How's Earl got on that gig?" Now I sort of know how you got on that gig. I think it was through the rockabilly stuff you were doing, the project with Slim Jim Phantom from Stray Cats. I presume that was the link. But I mean, this is outrageous. You've got David, you've got John Lennon, and then next thing you're on this all-star gig in 85, the Carl Perkins special with Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Ringo. Dave Edmunds was the MD on that. I mean, that must have been a gig and a half, that.
It was a trip because, I mean, it came about through the Slim Jim Phantom and Lee Rocker, Stray Cats, having worked with Carl before, and knowing Carl and working with Dave Edmunds, and they were in that scene. And, we had just launched, I think, the first record around that time the Phantom Rocker and Slick record. And I came along just as part of the package, I guess, because I'm the last guy they would have called for a rockabilly thing for Carl Perkins. But when I got there, it was amazing. I think it was like 2 days shoot. We did like about 2 or 3 rehearsals in London.
There's a lot of songs in the show as well. It was a big set list.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot, and a whole lot of guitar players, but it was, I remember at the rehearsals, I think it was maybe the second day. It was a funky little place, actually, and it was right next to, there was some railway tracks in the back of the place. I mean, I don't remember this place at all. It was a cool little place. And in the middle of one of the rehearsal days, I'm standing on the stage and I get this really bizarre feeling. And I look around and there's Eric Clapton's here, Dave Edmunds here, Ringo's behind me, George Harrison's over here, my guys are on stage, and I felt like, did somebody just drop you here out of a spaceship? What is this?
Yeah, insane.
Yeah, I mean, these are the guys that, when I was a kid, I was watching these guys. I was picking up all the magazines and looking at reading the stories, looking at the pictures, buying the records. And for me to be standing in the middle of this thing, it was kind of funny at the time, I remember.
Yeah, and when you're in a room and you're in that sort of setup, the names you've got there and the stuff they've done, at the end of the day, they're making a show, they're making a TV show or, recording. But is it still that essence of, I don't know, 7, 8 musicians in a room making music and jamming? Or,
that's all it was.
Yeah.
That's all it was, man. It was great.
Which comes across, it just comes across in that special. It's just the fun. And there's no pressure on anyone at all, is there?
No, I mean, the way they put those songs together, too, it was like, all these conversations are going between Clapton and George and Dave Edmunds, and everybody go, what are you going to play? Well, I don't know. I'm going to play the Strat on this. I'll just do the rhythm bit, and you do this. And it just fell into place.
That's great, isn't it? It sort of reminds you why you got into music in the first place. It's one of those gigs.
It's exactly why I got into music in the first place. It's also exactly why I've never been a session player, even though I guess I have a number of album credits, a lot. Yeah. But they were brought in. I would get brought in almost as like a one extra band member kind of thing, as opposed to the chart reading guy.
Ironically, because of the conversation we're having today, I always surround myself with good musicians. Make sure you've got a good guitarist. Your style of guitar, and how would you describe yourself as a guitarist?
I've
just flummoxed you completely.
When I pick my guitar up, the way I approach my guitar sometimes, maybe I'm completely wrong in how I see this. I'm so bloody disorganized in a lot of like little day-to-day stuff, like little organizing little stuff like that. With the guitar, I don't have to do that. I just pick it up and it just kind of does what it does. And my roots really go back to early rock and roll and a lot of bluesy stuff. Stuff that's more feel-oriented than it is musically prowess, because, I mean, if anything, when I'm playing my guitar, I'm happiest playing rhythm guitar than I am soloing and doing all that stuff. I think it's a very, I would say, just to sound realistic, my guitar playing comes from the street. It's not learned. It's all about the feel and what fits in for each situation. Yeah. I'm not going to do for this guy what I do for that guy. And it's not because I think about it. I'll go in the room, we'll play, I'll feel it, and I go, and automatically I'll fall into that. Then maybe the next guy is completely different, and I sit down, I feel it, I read the room, and it just comes out. I think my playing is just really organic.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of guitarists? Do you think there's a lot of guitarists who do have their thing and they do their thing?
Yeah. The way I approach the guitar a lot of times too, like, okay, when I first started playing, you're doing cover songs, you're covering Beatles and Stones and whatever. I'm going back, to that beginning. I couldn't do it. I could not copy note for note what I heard on the record. Now I could learn the chords and I could do all that stuff, but for the bits and bobs and the solos, I could never do them note for note. But what I could do, I could emulate the guitarist. So if I was going to, do a blues song, let's Jeff Beck's first solo stuff, like, Truth. I could sound like Beck.
Yeah.
But I couldn't play all the notes, though. I couldn't play the same notes. Or if I tried to play a Beatles solo, it's a nightmare. When I work with Hudson, I got to really work on those. I could get the sound, but for me to learn this stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely a unique way of going about it.
Yeah. Well, that completely makes sense, yeah. When we're talking or I'm talking to younger musicians and, it's like that, what advice would you give to young musicians? Obviously, turn up on time and know your parts and all that and, be creative.
Run.
No, don't do that. But don't learn your parts, whatever you do. But no, the most important thing is getting on with people. And if you're getting brought in to do these albums, as you say, not just as a session guy, someone who's got a bit more of a say on where it's going, your reputation, you must get on with people. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's very fair to say. And the way that would work, in all aspects of life, there's a pecking order, there's a hierarchy, there's behavior, there's protocol, sort of little rules of engagement. Yeah. And you just need to know when you walk into a situation, the do's and don'ts of it. You walk in, you're respectful, you say hi to everybody, you get your gear set up, and you just sort of morph into the situation. I've seen guys that are very talented that people won't hire because they just don't understand where you fit in.
Yeah.
When you're walking into when you're on somebody else's dinner table, you need to know where you fit in and act accordingly. And that's not to be subservient or any of that. It's just, hey, this is how this house is run. And you need to be astute enough to realize that, which I learned really early on from my mentor, Michael Kamen, who's the one who really catapulted my career. For those who don't know, Michael Kamen had a successful rock and roll band in New York in the early 70s. They were old Juilliard School of Music graduates. And he went on to score films and stuff like that. And when I was about 17 or 18, I met him through a friend, and he took a liking to me. So he helped me out to get me gigs, and he would bring me in on sessions. I learned from him at a very early age how to do that.
Yeah, one of the most valuable lessons, absolutely. Which I've read something. There was a quote, but it's the quote doesn't matter. It's about you're being a sideman, which I want to talk about the documentary you did, which I thought was wonderful. But it's basically for a sideman, or to be in that position, leave your ego at the door, isn't it? Read the situation.
Absolutely. I mean, your ego needs to be there just for self-survival in terms of playing your gear and doing your performance,
absolutely,
right? The healthy part of the ego. But, you need to learn that when you walk into a situation like that, you're walking into a David Bowie rehearsal, and you've been given a list of songs, which you've learned, which you better learn. And you just go into a rehearsal, and he's going to call the shots all day. Now, he's not telling you play an A note or a B note or this. It's just as you're running through the songs, you're listening to them. And not every situation is the same. But with David, we'd be doing a song, go, you know what, boss, I'm not sure if this bit's working. He's going, you know what, why don't you knock something else out and see how it works?
But to get to that point in the conversation, or that point in the process, you've got to have earned that you've got to have read the room, and
yes, and you have to have earned. You also have to have earned it. The first thing you do is you have to earn that, and then the second thing, reading the room and reading him. Because I'll admit, there's once or twice with David I mean, one incident in particular where I just made a suggestion at absolutely the wrong time, and I got chewed out. And this is after we knew each other for 40 years. And I still fucked it up. And we went in the studio to cut a track. And, the last many years now, everybody's cutting records in chunks. The drummer's coming on Tuesday. The bass player comes on Wednesday. Then you're overdubbing everything. So we went in and we had to cut. We recut Rebel Rebel for this Charlie's Angels movie thing. And we cut two. We did Water Salute Sunset and Rebel, right? And it was great. We did it live in the studio. And I called up the next one. I said, man, boss, that was killer. We should really, the next time we get in there, let's get the guys together at the same time. He goes, I'll tell you when and how, Slicky. And it was like, I could feel the ice. I felt the phone line icing up as the words came out of his mouth. But the good thing about him was he would say it. That would be the end of it.
Yeah, he wasn't bearing grudges.
Hell no. And I think a couple of weeks later when we were back in the studio, I said, so how about my suggestions? And he just laughed.
Well, you'd obviously got to that point where you had that relationship. I read somewhere that you had a great relationship. You were friends while you worked, but it's not like you were in touch when you weren't working. It's like you weren't hanging out, going for coffees. But there was a healthy friendship and working relationship when you were working, which I think that when you're dealing with an artist at that level, I think that's spot on, isn't it?
It is. It also comes along with reading the situation. With David, I always felt that, we work together. It really works. It's not just the boss and the worker. It was a collaboration. There was a lot of respect in there. We were absolute best friends when we were working, but in between, it would be a rare occasion. And I thought, you know what? I'm comfortable with the way this is. Leave well enough alone.
Yeah, but you see that chemistry on stage. That was always there, as in the classic sideman. The chemistry, and he'd give you the space as well.
That's true. And the thing about being a sideman is that, people would say to me, well, it does feel kind of odd that you're like second fiddle all the time to the big guys. And I'm going, no. And I don't look at it like that. I'm the support guy. I'm the guy with the rest of the band that has to keep it together so that he doesn't have to think about a fucking thing when he gets up there except his show, because we've got his back. And I actually love doing it. And even though when I started off, Beatles and Stones, I wanted my own band like that. That's what I wanted.
You wanted to be in the middle.
This is my guys. I wrote these songs. These are my band. This is ours. But once for whatever reason it happened, and I would say that David was really the first sideman situation that I had, a real one, I realized there's an art to this. And number one, I do it well. And number two, I enjoy the hell out of it. So great. And I'm very proud that I could do that for my whole career.
But when you do those solo albums, and there's still collaborations, does that tick that box of the musician, when you started off wanting to be your band? Does that tick that box?
This goes back to the sideman thing, too. I think I'm more comfortable being that sideman guy than I am being... Look, when I'm on stage with David or I'm talking about a record we did, sure, I'm front and center at that point. Absolutely. And I enjoy the hell out of that. But it feels much better doing it in increments as opposed to having to be that 24 hours a day. So even on the record, the Fistful of Devils record I did, I got pushed into it by a friend. He was convinced I should do this. So, and I wrote a bunch of songs. I got some, actually Hudson wrote one on there with me, and I got some people. And so we just went in the studio and I cut 2 full albums at the same time. And then they sat there for 7 years.
Oh, really?
I didn't know what to do with them. They just kind of sat there. And I was approached by a label to put it out. They said, do you have any new music? I said, I actually do. It's been sitting there. And that's why I did it, I never been comfortable being like Earl Slick on his own with a band or a backup band. Never, even on my albums.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, you play your role very well. I've got to say about the documentary, because I remember it just one time when because you've been to Liverpool now since I met you in 2015. You've been to Liverpool and the Cavern many times. I think you played here 3 or 4 times. I know I know they look after you in the Beatles themed hotel next door. So it was the Hard Days.
I love that place.
I know. So Liverpool over the years. I mean, prior to you coming here for Beatle Week in 2015, had you been here much? Was it just occasional gigs, or because you've been here quite a few times over the last few years?
I have been there a lot more over the last few years, but I had been there a number of times before that. And one thing I always liked about Liverpool, like when I first went to London in the early 70s, whenever that was, it felt very much like England, what I thought England would feel like.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, the McDonald's started to show up in central London and all of that. And it started to get like that. And I hadn't been to Liverpool for a while. And I don't remember when this was, but I went to Liverpool and I went, wow, Liverpool still looks like it's supposed to look like. Now, it has changed since then. Because the whole Benjamin's thing with the pedestrian shopping, that wasn't there the first time I went there.
No, that was probably it was the Capital of Culture. When we awarded Capital of Culture, European Capital of Culture 2008. There was a lot of that. The new Liverpool, a lot of investments and all that. So it does look. Right. It's a great city, but I think it's still at the heart of it. It's still got that. It's certainly not London, is it? I mean, it's something.
It definitely does. Because every time I go to Liverpool, when I go to London, I mean, I do gravitate towards areas in London that feel like old London, But when I go to Liverpool, it still feels like, old Liverpool to me. It does.
So are you? What have you got coming up? Are you back out on tour? Are you, what's
doing a one-off? I think 2 nights at the 100 Club in London with an artist named Robert Fleming. I just did his album.
Okay.
I'm coming for that, and then I'm doing a Beatle thing in Woodstock.
Really? Okay. What's that?
They got to get back in touch with me. I can't remember what it is. It's credible though. The people that they told me and how they're running it. It's absolutely going to be kind of fun. And then back to the UK in July because my book because that got knocked back 2 years by the pandemic.
Yeah, I remember talking about it. I remember, probably more than a year ago, you said it was out. It was due out. So it's out this summer.
So we finally got to it. We got the final manuscript has gone in. It's going to be on Penguin, Random House, which is a British company. So I'll be coming over sometime in July, in probably through August, doing promotions and book signings for that. I'm thinking about maybe doing a couple of gigs around it.
Okay, well, obviously, if you're in the UK when we got the festival on the end of August, it'd be lovely to get you involved in that again, especially with the book out. It'd be great. We asked you. Oh yeah. We asked all of our guests. We're putting this Cavern Podcast playlist together, so everyone's got to choose 3 of their favourite Liverpool Merseyside songs. So you did send them over to me, and were they in any order? Because it was a 1, 2, and 3. But your first choice anyway, Cilla Black, Anyone Who Had a Heart. Why did you choose that one?
I don't know why. That was one of those songs that it did come over here. It was a hit here. I don't know if it was as big of a hit, but I was hearing it on the radio here, so it must have been a hit back then because they only played hits. It was something that just reminded me. As soon as I hear that, my brain goes right to the Beatlemania thing when I hear that, because it was about that same period of time. And then I bought a couple of her singles and an album. I loved her stuff.
We were talking before in the office. Somebody was, I think it was Jay who produces this, was showing us a clip of Scylla from the 1990s when she used to do. She became in this country known for being a TV personality, Saturday night prime TV with all these shows. And I think it was only when Scylla sadly passed away that a lot of people were reminded what a great singer she was. You know, and that
she was amazing.
Amazing. I mean, all the Bacharach stuff and that, you know, you belt some of those songs she belting out in that period. Hugely successful there. But yeah, a great song, a great choice. And again, another artist managed by Brian.
And the other thing, too, is that she did manage to hit the American fan magazines. And I loved that whole British, the bang, the heavy bangs and the clothes and the girls. I mean, I was in love with every British girl that I ever saw. But Scylla, you know,
she had the style. She had the style.
She did. She had the whole thing, the songs, all that stuff.
And of course, used to do the cloakroom in the Cavern Club alongside the Beatles. She used to work in the Cavern. Yeah. So that's a great choice. So that'll be going on the Cavern podcast list. The other one, The Searchers, When You Walk in the Room. Great song. I'm on stage in about an hour, and I might actually crucify that on stage in the Cavern and dedicate it to you. Why that one, The Searchers? Big fan.
The Searchers, it is also really good memories of that period of my life. But The Searchers songs had really cool 12-string electric guitar licks.
Yeah.
And that I love that song. It's another one. The way I can't even think of why, but they just throw me way back to that feeling. And that song does that. And I still love that lick that opens up that song.
Yeah. Well, I was actually I grew up, two of my closest friends when I was growing up and I was in bands with them were actually their fathers were in the Searchers with John McNally and Mike Pender. So we were in our first bands, and when the Searchers would be on tour, they had this big posh house in Crosby where we live, and in one room there was John McNally Senior, his guitar room, and you weren't allowed in it. But of course, John Jr., when his dad was on tour, knew exactly where the key was. So we'd go around there. We'd be about 15, 16, and we were terrible. We'd be doing our own stuff, and we'd go in and we'd pick all of his Gibsons, his Rickenbackers, his Hofners, all those guitars that he used, and we'd be thrashing them out and using them while he was away. His guitar collection is incredible. Okay, and of course, the Beatles. You chose a Beatles song. Which Beatles song did you choose?
Help.
Yeah. Why Help? Of so many, always interesting. What could this choice change on any given day, or is that your favorite song by the Beatles?
No, that always has been out of the Beatles. A lot of it, I think, had to do with maybe where my head was at, going through some teenage, silliness that you go through, puberty, insanity, and I'm thinking I can't pinpoint. I'm guessing I was going through just maybe I was breaking up with a girl or some weird shit was happening, and those words got to me, and
that's interesting because that song, the lyrics in that song were lost on so many people because it was such an upbeat song. But because we all know that he wrote that as a slow, it was literally a cry for help. But a lot of that, so you picked up on that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I picked up on the whole angst part of that, and even to this day when I hear it, I feel good because I'm hearing it, but it's a sad song.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is a sad song. And it just hit, and the cool rundown licks that they're doing, the electric licks that George is doing on stuff, the whole thing, it just, it was a depressing song with happy music.
Yeah. No, great choice. They'll be going in there. No, it's been great to have you both on the Cavern podcast. Our first animals, so we will be tapping into a different audience there. We'll wake him up. We need to say goodbye. Come on, Tank. Come on, Tank. Come on, boy. Come on.
Oh, my good boy.
Come and say bye to Uncle John. I'm your strange Uncle John from Liverpool. And then we've got Paul here, Paul Jones and Jay. So we'll say thank you very much, Earl, and thank you, Tank. It's been fantastic. Look at that shot there. That'll be the promo one. Earl, take care, and we'll see you back at the Cavern very soon, we hope, okay?
Cheers, man. I'll see you this summer for sure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cavern Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we can't do this without you, the audience. So please like, share, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, get involved on our socials and tell us your Cavern stories. See you next time on the Cavern Podcast.